Premier, I know you were asked about this in the House, and I'm just trying to understand what British Columbia did in terms of our vaccine card that meant that it is not in alignment with the federal vaccine passport. Will British Columbians be required to get additional documentation, or is BC going to do the work to make our vaccine card align with what Ottawa has produced?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And you'll remember that British Columbia and Quebec were among the first provinces to come out with an immunization, a vaccine card, so that British Columbians could, within their communities, go to the play, go to a hockey game, go out to dinner with friends, and interact in their communities or in British Columbia with other people who had also taken steps to protect themselves by getting immunized. The card simply says that you have received 2 doses of an approved vaccine, and you're also required to show proof of identification, and that can be a variety of different things. The federal government's test is much higher for international travel, and we said so at the time that we implemented our immunization card, that at the point where the borders are open, particularly, of course, to the south of us, and those who want to travel internationally are going to require some other form of identification distributed and approved by the federal government. That decision has been made. Those cards have now been developed, and they involve not just being immunized, but what vaccine did you receive, what date, what batch number did that vaccine come from. All of that information is held by the Ministry of Health privately and confidentially, but now that is going to be required to be part of the federal immunization or card or passport. We're going to continue to work with the federal government. What I want British Columbians to know is that if you have no plans to travel in the immediate future, the 3.7 million of you who have already downloaded a BC immunization card can continue to go to the play, can continue to go to a concert, go out for dinner with some friends. If you want to travel internationally or on federally regulated modes of transportation, you're going to require a federal card. And you can access that through British Columbia sources, and you can also, of course, access that by reviewing whatever material and information the federal government is providing at this time. But you're going to need 2 at the moment, and we'll see how we go in the months ahead, how we can bring those 2 together. But we wanted to initially, Richard, we wanted to make sure that British Columbians could participate within their own communities. The federal government's responsible for international travel.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, in a roundtable you did last Friday with ethnic media in Vancouver, you described the requirement of a PCR test as stupidity. That's the federal rules that are now in place. When somebody returns to Canada, they must produce a test, one that they can get before they leave the country. Have you raised these concerns with the Prime Minister? Do you have any word from him that they may remove this requirement for travel? And if you had any conversation with Governor Jay Inslee, about the barriers that requirement have in terms of travel between BC and Washington State?
Yeah, well, I'll start at the front end. I have not spoken directly to the Prime Minister about the testing requirements to re-enter Canada. Officials have been having those discussions on my behalf. My Intergovernmental Relations Secretariat is raising these issues with the federal government. I find the notion that I could go and get a test in Vancouver, travel to the United States, and then come back with that very same test as kind of counter to the whole point. The point is, if you're traveling somewhere else and you may have contracted COVID-19, you should be tested first before you return so that the border officials can have a good understanding of what your health situation is. The notion that a 3-day-old test received in Vancouver is going to be good enough in Bellingham 2 days later doesn't make sense to me, and that's what I articulated in my conversation with the South Asian media last week. And to put a finer point on it, I had been invited by Governor Inslee to visit Seattle this week to talk to the Mayor of Seattle about pressing issues that we've been working on over the past number of months, to sit down with a business roundtable. All of those plans were being made. And then the notion that I would get a test and coming back on a Saturday, So having to get a test in Vancouver to confirm that I was traveling outside of the country didn't make any sense to me. The borders are not open to all British Columbians yet, so I've canceled the trip. I very much regret that. I was looking forward to seeing Governor Inslee, the Mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkan, and as well as maybe taking in a Canucks Kraken game. But all of that is been postponed, not just because of the test, but that was a factor in the equation, and also, of course, without the border being fully open to other British Columbians, although the trip was largely business, there would have been some recreation involved in that. I didn't want to create more grief for other travelers. I wanted to be as transparent as possible about my actions. I do believe that the test requirement will mean that those who like to go for a day of shopping in Seattle will think twice about it. And the Minister of Health has made it clear we don't want to see people going and pretending to have COVID symptoms so they can get a test so they can go shopping. And not that British Columbians would do that, but that is a possibility. We want to make sure we're focusing our testing on those with symptoms so that they can take preventative measures to protect their families if they are COVID positive. So there's a whole bunch of question marks in my mind about the testing regime that were brought forward quite honestly and in good faith at a time when borders were uncertain. Those border issues are now becoming clearer. Vaccinations are now, of course, with British Columbians, almost 90%. First dose, just 83.5%. Second dose. So we have a protected population, and as they travel, their immunization, I believe, should be sufficient to cross borders. But those are decisions made by the federal government. Long answer, sorry.
Next question is from Camille Baines, Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. I'd like to know if you had some idea that there would be a nationally standardized vaccine passport and introduce a different one anyway. And if not, what kind of leadership should the feds have shown so the provinces wouldn't have had to use their own resources to come up with passports that would have to be replaced?
Well, thank you for that. And we were in discussions, all provinces through the Council of Federation and with the federal government in the spring, about the need for some form of immunization card. Again, the federal government is responsible for international travel, and so that was not my knitting. I left that to them to deal with. But we had a very high uptake on immunizations in British Columbia, as you know, leading the country. Quebec and British Columbia both almost dose for dose in terms of per capita immunization. Both provinces agreed that we needed to make sure that our citizens could engage with each other confidently and knowing that those around them, whether it be in recreation, the arts, or just out for a meal, were also taking those precautions. So we acted proactively because we felt that it was important to do so. I don't want to diminish the importance of more information for international travel. We oftentimes, certainly leaving North America, you require a passport in almost every jurisdiction you travel to, which has a whole host of personal information. So I felt that the federal government would manage international travel in their way, and we would manage our domestic interactions until such time as there was clarity internationally about what would be required. You will know that not that long ago, in very recent memory, AstraZeneca was not recognized as an appropriate immunization by U.S. officials. That's now changed, and there will continue to be changes as the international community works through these issues. And that's the responsibility of the federal government. I don't begrudge them that. I do not regret for a minute that we took immediate steps to give people confidence that they could travel with their colleagues and within their community.
Camille, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. What types of issues or concerns will you be bringing up with First Ministers around this as far as resources that had to be used for vaccine passports by individual provinces?
Well, the federal government has committed to funding these passports as they come forward and working with the provinces as we distribute them. So I'm not concerned that the cost will be an issue from the provincial treasury perspective. It is, again, we've been working together collaboratively, federal and provincial governments, both orders, with different political perspectives right across the country for almost from the beginning of the pandemic. And so I'm confident we'll continue to do that. Again, obviously everyone would like to have most things done yesterday. It would have been nice to have a federal immunization passport available before now, but there were a whole bunch of very good reasons why that wasn't the case. Uncertainty about AstraZeneca is an example that's near and dear to my heart because I'm a 2-dose AstraZeneca guy, as is Premier Doug Ford. So we were very concerned that other jurisdictions, mostly the United States, were not recognizing that vaccine. So all of these issues had to be resolved, and that's the responsibility of the federal government, and they've been working through those.